Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Tuesday, April 7th, 2015, around 3:54 p.m. in Billerica, Massachusetts. It's just a damp and overcast day, about 41 degrees. Some news to report, sad news to report in the world of entertainment. Actor James Best, known for his role as Roscoe on The Dukes of Hazzard, passed away at the age of 88. Prayers to his family. Happy National Beer Day. And some big WWE news. WWE TFNF is coming back on June 23rd on the USA Network, and SmackDown is moving from Sci-Fi Network to USA Network come January of 2016, and the WWE Network is free for the month of April. That's about it on the news. My next subject is about the continuation of professional wrestling regional territories. This one I'm going to cover is the Mid-South / UWF territory that was run by Bill Watts from 1979 through 1987, and it covered Oklahoma, parts of Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. Mid-South Wrestling was one of the best regional territories of its time because it had major stars there like Junkyard Dog, Ted DiBiase, the Fabulous Freebirds, Dr. F.C. Williams, Terry Taylor, Magnum TA, Mr. Wrestling No. 2, Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, you name it, it was there. And it also started one of the announcers who was on Mid-South Wrestling and UWF became a WWE Hall of Famer. It's Jim Ross. And the background of Mid-South Wrestling, it was actually other regional territory that was started in the early 50s by Leroy McGurk, who was a wrestler, a great wrestler, but he suffered a car accident and he lost his sight. So he became a wrestling promoter, and Tri-State Wrestling covered the same territory that Mid-South did, with Louisiana, Arkansas, parts of Texas, and Oklahoma. And Tri-State Wrestling was a NWA affiliated territory for many years. And Cowboy Bill Watts moved to Louisiana and buys the territory off of Leroy McGurk around 1979, and he rebrands it Mid-South Wrestling. Mid-South Wrestling had a great wrestling program, and usually this program was taped at a local Boys and Girls Club, and the Mid-South television program mainly showed main event matches of top stars and mid-card matches of top stars. They would maybe have a squash match here or there, but squash matches on the Mid-South program were few and far between. It wasn't the dominating thing on the program like other wrestling programs back in the day with WWE and AWA and Mid-Atlantic, which was basically squash matches and maybe a feature match or two once in a while. And Mid-South developed, and calling the action for Mid-South Wrestling were Boyd Pierce and Cowboy Bill Watts. And the biggest star in Mid-South Wrestling history was the Junkyard Dog, who was an African American. And he was in major angles. He was North American champion many times. That was the top bout in Mid-South Wrestling. And he had famous feuds with the Fabulous Freebirds, Michael P.S. Hayes, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Buddy Jack Roberts. And Michael Hayes, actually, it's one of the storylines, blinded the Junkyard Dog with shaving cream, the hair cream. And this angle was worked that Junkyard Dog was blind. They thought he was never going to regain his sight, and they were piping it up that he couldn't see the birth of his daughter on television. But actually, in real life, he was hiding out at Bill Watts' home so they could play the angle perfectly and stuff like that. And many poor people were sending in money to see if the dog was okay. Mainly, they were getting like $1 to $5 bills, real money, not Monopoly money. And they had the big blow-off of this feud at the Louisiana Superdome, where Bill Watts would always have his major cards there at Mid-South Wrestling for years, and the Junkyard Dog miraculously beat Michael P.S. Hayes in a dog collar match, and the Junkyard Dog regained his sight, beats Michael Hayes, and then becomes a superstar for the next 4 years in Mid-South Wrestling, feuding against the Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, the Grappler, King Kong Bundy, Kamala, and Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase was another star in Mid-South Wrestling. He started off as a face, but eventually he became heel around October 1982. He faced off against a Junkyard Dog in a scientific match. Ted DiBiase had a glove on to protect an injured wrist. The Fabulous Freebirds injured in a tag team match, just to have protection. But when Ted DiBiase gets thrown out of the ring by the Junkyard Dog, he puts something, a foreign object, in that glove, and then when Junkyard Dog tries to help him up, Ted DiBiase punches him, beats the dog 1, 2, 3, and becomes the new North American champion, and starts a great heel run, which was one of the best heels in Mid-South Wrestling. He eventually aligns himself with Matt Bourne and Hacksaw Jim Duggan as the Rat Pack. They added General Scandal Akbar as their manager, but Hacksaw Jim Duggan didn't want that. He didn't want to be associated with an Arabic American. He became face and became the patriot of Hacksaw Jim Duggan. And started to carry 2x4, feuded with Ted DiBiase. They had a classic feud in Mid-South Wrestling. They had like Who Was the Sharp Dressed Man and stuff, and it was a tuxedo match. Who the loser leaves town was pretty awesome and stuff. Also, another star that came out of Mid-South Wrestling was Magnum TA. Magnum TA came to Mid-South Wrestling in 1983 from Championship Wrestling from Florida and Portland Wrestling. He wasn't that big of a star, but they typed him up as like Mr. Wrestling number 2's protege. Mr. Wrestling number 2's Johnny Locker, who was a mask wrestler, who was a grizzled veteran, and he was training the next big superstar with Magnum TA and stuff like that. But like Mr. Wrestling number 2 wanted Magnum TA to get aggressive, and this was turning Mr. Wrestling 2 from a face to a heel. And Magnum TA, they actually captured the Mid-South Tag Team titles, but Mr. Wrestling 2 turned on Magnum in a match against the Midnight Express, turning on him. Midnight Express won the Mid-South Tag Team Champions, and then stipulations, the loser was get 10 lashes. Terry Taylor was a friend of Magnum TA's, like took the lashes for Magnum and stuff because Magnum was hurt and devastated. Magnum TA and Mr. Wrestling 2 had a long feud. Actually, Magnum won the North American title a few times as well, and then he signed with Jim Crockett to join Jim Crockett Promotions. Another wrestler who was big at Mid-South Wrestling was Dr. Death Steve Williams. He teamed with Ted DiBiase several times to become Mid-South Tag Team Champions. Dr. Death got a major push. Also, another wrestler was Terry Taylor. Terry Taylor, who was a very good wrestler in the mid-'80s with Mid-South Wrestling. He looked like a potential future world champion when he was in Mid-South Wrestling. And they also had King Kong Bundy get a start at Mid-South Wrestling, Kamala, and others. They even had, when they had big shows in New Orleans Superdome, they would bring in such wrestlers as Andre the Giant and the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Also, Jake the Snake Roberts started off as a star in Mid-South Wrestling. He was first a heel. He feuded with the Snowman. They had a big match at the New Orleans Superdome, and in the Snowman's corner was the great Muhammad Ali, which was amazing. The boxer. It's got a lot of press. This happened around 1984. Also, Dirty Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch would come in once in a while for Mid-South Wrestling. Crusher Khrushchev, and Mid-South Wrestling was doing very big business around like the Oklahoma City and Arkansas and Louisiana area. Was long bus car trips because the territory was so close. They didn't fly talent too much, like to the certain arenas. They did like a lot of driving and stuff, which was amazing. A lot of cars, probably the wrestlers' cars probably would be broken down and stuff like that. And Mid-South Wrestling was not an NWA affiliated territory, but once in a while Ric Flair would come in and defend the NWA World title against Terry Taylor and Ted DiBiase. Also, they had they started the Midnight Express versus Rock and Roll Express feud at Mid-South Wrestling. The Midnight Express were Bobby Ian and Dennis Condrey with Jim Cornette as their manager. The Rock and Roll Express were Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. They had a long-running feud in Mid-South Wrestling, probably one of the best tag team feuds of all time. Some of the greatest matches of all time in Mid-South Wrestling. This is how they got their break and stuff. Around 1985, Boyd Pierce stopped announcing Mid-South Wrestling, and good old JR Jim Ross took it over. Bill Watts continued to book Mid-South Wrestling like crazy, and it was a good regional territory and stuff like that. But Bill Watts had a vision. He wanted to go national to compete with the WWE and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And he had a great talent base with like Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Dick Slater and Jake the Snake Roberts and Ted DiBiase and a few others, Terry Taylor. But the problem was he had the same talent pool for several years, and he could not get fresh talent, because this is when the wrestling wars started, with every big name was either signed for WWE Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling or the other dying regional territories like Florida and AWA and World Class in Memphis. Their top stars weren't going to go to Mid-South Wrestling at the time, and even though Bill Watts was doing great business, he still wanted to give going national a shot. And in the spring of 1986, Bill Watts decided to raid a lot of talent from World Class Championship Wrestling. He got the booker, Ken Mantell, to come over to Mid-South Wrestling, and Ken Mantell brought in a lot of World Class Championship Wrestling superstars like the Fabulous Freebirds, Chris Adams, Iceman King Parsons, The Missing Link, and Jack Victory, John Tatum, Missy Hyatt, Sunshine, a lot, and General Scandal Akbar and One Man Gang. Mid-South Wrestling lost a few talent like Butch Reed and Jake the Snake Roberts, King Kong Bundy, Kamala, and a few others left as well to go up to other regional territories and stuff like that. And they had to rebrand the Mid-South Wrestling UWF, and they had offices in Oklahoma and Texas. They still ran the same territory. They got a lot of television stations and stuff, and they had new shows like Power Pro, which was basically the same format of the Mid-South Wrestling, but they filmed in an arena in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Fort Worth, Texas, instead of the local Boys and Girls Club in Louisiana. And UWF was pretty good, but there was a problem. There was a lot of talent who at UWF, like Terry Gordy, Ted DiBiase, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and a few others who had deals with All Japan Wrestling and New Japan. So every once in a while, they'll have to do storylines for those superstars to get injured in the storyline, so they could go off to Japan. But this got to be ridiculous because they did not have any fresh talent. They had the same talent roster for years and stuff like that, and they couldn't get anybody new, so it just got out of control and stuff. Also, Eddie Gilbert was brought in as a talent, as a manager, wrestler, and a booker. It just got ridiculous. Also, Bill Watts was losing big time money on the deal and stuff like that, and he wanted to sell out. They developed some other talent. They had Stain and Rick Steiner coming into the UWF, and Shane Douglas. And Bill Watts was losing $50,000 a week out of his money for the UWF, and he needed to sell bad, or he was going to go out of business. He actually had Jim Ross call Jim Crockett, who ran Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, saying that we're broke and stuff like that. We need you to bail him out, because Jim Ross say that Vince McMahon was making an offer to buy the UWF, and because Bill Watts didn't like Vince McMahon, I don't think he like Jim Crockett that much either. So I think he didn't want to sell to Vince McMahon. He wanted to sell to Crockett, and Jim Ross calls Jim Crockett saying, "Well, can you bail us out? We'll buy UWF." Jim Crockett bought UWF, and then he basically ran the company to the ground. He just brought some of his own talent, which was like B-level talent for the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, to like UWF. He had like Big Bubba Rogers as UWF champion, who beat the one-man gang. The original champion was like Terry Gordy, then it was one-man gang, and then Big Bubba Rogers, and the syndicated like programs for UWF with Power Pro Wrestling turned to be mainly Jim Crockett promotion guys, B-level talent and stuff like that. And the UWF was just becoming just another Crockett show and stuff like that. They buried all the guys on like the UWF on the show for like Jim Crockett Promotions. It was terrible. Terry Taylor turned heel, and he was a decent heel, but they buried him along with Eddie Gilbert and the others. Dr. Death Steve Williams became the UWF champion in the summer of 1987, and it was supposed to be a title unification match between him and Ric Flair, the NWA World title, but they did not succeed in that. They just buried the talent and stuff like that. They should have had that in a kind of an invasion angle of the UWF and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling around this time. Have like the UWF guys heel, especially Dr. Death, who was, he was a face, but he could have, he with the name Dr. Death, he could have easily been a heel, and a few others. Terry Taylor, Eddie Gilbert, and Stain and Rex Steiner could be facing off against the top stars of like the Mid-Atlantic Jim Crockett promotion, like the Horsemen, who were heels, but they could have easily turned face for that if they had that invasion angle. The UWF was eventually phased out in 1987 at the end of it, which was very sad because Bill Watts had an opportunity to become the third biggest promotion in the United States with the talent base he had, but I think that it was just the same talent base, and it just killed his business. Plus, during that part of the United States suffered an oil recession, which is tough, and it was tough, and they couldn't keep it up. And most of the other talent, like Ted DiBiase, Jake the Snake Roberts, and Hacksaw Jim Duggan, went to the WWE, so that killed it. But at least the UWF kept, when it folded, Jim Crockett Promotions kept Stain and Rick Steiner and Steve Dr. Death Williams, and got rid of all the others, which was pretty disappointing because our Terry Taylor, who was developing a great heel character, this was before the Red Rooster, could have been a mid-card heel or top-level heel. Maybe he could have replaced Ric Flair as a top heel, and Crockett, but I heard something he had problems with Dusty Rhodes, the booker, and Dusty would have probably buried him. And the tape library of Mid-South and UWF is now owned by the WWE, and they've put out a DVD of Mid-South Wrestling, which is pretty good, and it's now on the WWE Network, Mid-South UWF, and it was a great wrestling promotion. Mid-South and UWF, it was but died a premature just because of so much money of a recession. That's about it on that. I'll be back for the third and final video blog of the night, which will be about former NHL player Dino Ciccarelli. Have a good day, everybody. Bye now.